Imagine walking into a grand Roman villa, the sunlight streaming through wide-open courtyards, the scent of olive oil and baked bread lingering in the air. And then, your eyes fall to the floor. Beneath your very feet lies a story carved in stone, painted with tiny tiles, whispering secrets that have survived for over 2,000 years. These are not just decorations. Roman mosaics were a language, a visual code filled with mythology, hidden meanings, and cultural reflections that tell us who the Romans were, what they believed, and what they wanted to show the world. Today, we are diving deep into the secret stories of ancient Roman mosaics. Forget dusty museum halls for a moment. Picture yourself standing in Pompeii, in Ostia Antica, or in the great villas of Sicily, where entire rooms still sparkle with the imagery of gods, monsters, and everyday Roman life. And here's the truth. These mosaics were not random art. They were carefully chosen. They were declarations of power, identity, and sometimes even warnings. One of the most famous examples is the Alexander mosaic from the House of the Faun in Pompeii. At first glance, it seems straightforward, a dramatic battle scene, Alexander the Great charging into combat against the Persian king Darius. But if you look closer, you notice the detail, the reflection of a terrified soldier in his shield, the exact placement of horses, the way Alexander's eyes are fixed on his enemy with unstoppable force. This was not just a memory of history, it was propaganda. The Roman patron who commissioned it wanted to be associated with the greatness of Alexander. To walk across this floor was to walk across a battlefield of glory, to feel part of a legendary story. But mosaics were not always about war. Many hid deeper, even darker messages. Take the famous mosaics of the Villa Romana del Casale in Sicily. You might know it for the so-called bikini girls. Young women captured in mid-motion, throwing discs, lifting weights, running races. They look so modern, so playful, almost like a snapshot from today's Olympic Games. But beneath that cheerful energy is a message about Roman discipline, about physical excellence, about the idea that the elite were destined to conquer both with their minds and their bodies. It's entertainment, but also ideology. And then there are the mosaics of mythology, where gods, nymphs, and monsters come alive on the floor. In Antioch, for example, archaeologists uncovered breathtaking images of the god Dionysus, the god of wine, often surrounded by satyrs and maenads in wild celebration. To a Roman, this wasn't just pretty decoration. It was an invocation of the divine, a way of saying, in this house, joy and abundance reign. But even here, there's a twist. Hidden among the revelry, you sometimes find tiny figures of death, of time, of the fates, reminding viewers that pleasure is fleeting, that life is fragile. Imagine stepping into a banquet hall, seeing dancers and grapes immortalized in stone, but then catching the gaze of a skull tucked into the corner, an eternal whisper, memento mori. Remember, you must die. This duality, pleasure and mortality, power and fragility, runs through many Roman mosaics. They were not afraid of contradiction. They embraced it. And for us, that makes them endlessly fascinating. Because when you kneel down and really look, you see the humanity of a people who lived 2,000 years ago. Their fears, their hopes, their jokes even. Yes, their jokes. Not all mosaics were solemn. In Ostia Antica, the ancient port city near Rome, you can still find mosaics that acted like street signs. Shop owners decorated the ground with symbols of their trade. An amphora for a wine merchant, a ship for a sailor, or fish for the fishmonger. But sometimes, the images were deliberately playful. There are mosaics with exaggerated animals, with cheeky mythological figures, with visual puns that only the locals of the time would get. It's almost like ancient graffiti, but made of stone, meant to last forever. And that's the paradox of mosaics. They are playful and eternal, fragile and resilient. Each tiny tessera, each colored stone, was placed with patience and purpose. The Romans knew that what they laid on their floors would outlast them, and they were right. Long after their walls have crumbled, their stories still shine under the Mediterranean sun. But here's a question. Were the mosaics meant for us, or only for them? When you step into the Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii, with its vivid wall frescoes and mosaic floors, you realize something powerful. These artworks were designed for intimacy, for small gatherings, for private eyes. A guest reclining at a dinner party would have hours to stare at the floor beneath him. Every detail would sink in. Every hidden symbol would eventually be noticed. And that means mosaics weren't just art, they were conversations across time. Take the marine mosaics, for example, often found in bathhouses. Dolphins leaping through waves, octopuses grappling with fish, even mythological sea creatures like tritons blowing their horns. On one level, these scenes were relaxing, perfect for the watery environment. But on another, They reminded Romans of their mastery of the seas, of Neptune's power, and of the constant tension between order and chaos. Imagine soaking in a Roman bath, surrounded by steam, while beneath your feet a story of the ocean unfolded tile by tile. You weren't just bathing, you were participating in a ritual of Roman identity. And then there are the mosaics that still puzzle archaeologists today. Strange symbols, unusual animals, cryptic arrangements that don't quite fit the usual themes. Were they private codes, religious symbols, inside jokes? We may never know. But isn't that what makes them magnetic? The mystery is part of the beauty. To walk on a Roman mosaic is to walk on the edge of a secret, one that may never be fully explained. So why does this matter today? Because Roman mosaics are more than relics. They are bridges. They connect us with the daily lives, the beliefs, and the imaginations of people long gone. And they do it in a way that is raw and direct. Unlike written texts, which required literacy, mosaics could be understood by anyone. Rich or poor, slave or citizen, you could look down and see the story. That's the genius of this art form. It was universal, democratic in its appeal, even while it decorated the villas of the elite. As we piece together these ancient secrets, we realize that mosaics were not static. They were alive. They moved with the sunlight, with the flicker of oil lamps, with the shuffle of sandals across their surface. And in that movement, they told their stories again and again, to every new generation. Today, they tell them to us. So the next time you find yourself in front of a Roman mosaic, in a museum in Pompeii, in Sicily, don't just glance and walk away. Stop. Kneel down if you can. Look closely. The Romans left these messages for those willing to see. They are not only fragments of ancient art. They are voices, whispers from another world, reminding us that beauty, power, and story can last far longer than empires. And maybe, just maybe, when you look long enough, you'll hear the echo of those ancient footsteps. The laughter of banquet guests, the murmur of prayers to forgotten gods, the splash of bathwater. Because Roman mosaics are not silent, they are still speaking. We just have to listen. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who loves a good mystery. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next story. There's a lot more to uncover, and I'd love to have you along for the journey.